that he is the door or the gate, depending on the version that you're reading from. And this morning we're going to look at two major characters in John 10, and we're just going to look at it from the eyes of two of them. And the first is the thief and the robber, and in John 10, throughout the 10 verses that we read, there are 4 key verses that talk about the thief, talk about the robber. And so in verse 1 it says, "If anyone that does not enter by the gate but climbs in some other way is a thief and a robber." Goes on in verse 5 to say, the sheep will never follow a stranger. In fact, they run away from them because they do not recognize the stranger's voice. In verse 8 it says, "All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them." And in verse 10 it says, "The thief comes only to steal, to kill, and to destroy." When Jesus is talking in John 10 regarding the thief and the robber, he is deliberately talking about the Pharisees, and he's addressing the Pharisees as he talks in John 10. And I went to exegete these passages. I went to open up these 4 verses and give us lots of examples on them, and I just realized that Jesus had already given us a much better example on what he means by this message to the Pharisees in John 9. And John 10 is a response to what Jesus has talked about in John 9. So in regards to the thief and the robber that we're going to look at this morning, we're just going to look at John 9 and we're just going to have a look at that story. And so John 9 is this incredible story where in John 9 verse 1 it says, "As he went along, he saw a blind man from birth. His disciples asked him, 'Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?' Jesus replies, 'Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work, and while I am in the world, I am the light of the world.' After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. 'Go,' he told him, 'wash in the pool of Siloam.' This means sent. So that the man went, washed, and came home seeing. His neighbours and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, 'Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?'" So here you have the start of this story where this man is on the side of the road. Jesus walks past, sees the man, and decides to heal him. He can't just walk past him. The man, Jesus tells him to spit, like Jesus spits on the ground, makes some mud with the saliva and puts it on the man's eyes. So that's the formula for healing blindness. And here Jesus then goes and tells the man, "Go and wash in this pool." And so what does the man do? Really simply, he gets up, he goes and he washes in the pool. So there's this beautiful interaction with this rabbi, Jesus, who goes along and just washes this man's eyes with mud and then tells him to get up, go to the pool and wash. The man simply gets up, goes to the pool and washes. This is a man who's been blind from birth. He's never seen colour, he's never seen light. In our society, that is so incredibly difficult in 2023. In this time, it is even more difficult. There's no social benefits. The church was the only group that would have helped this man, and his life would have been really, really, really difficult. I can't emphasise that enough. And so here is this man who goes, he gets washed by Jesus by mud and spit, goes to the pool, washes his eyes, and then as soon as he washes them, what happens? The blind man can see. This beautiful moment in this guy's life. His life has gone from darkness to light, and he can see. And so we have a miracle, right? We should be celebrating. This is a really good thing. The story goes on. His neighbours and those who had merely seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Now some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him. Isn't this so human, like what they're doing?" But he himself insisted, "I am the man." Well, that's good. Helpful. "How then were your eyes open?" they asked. And he replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud, put it on my eyes, and he told me to go wash in Siloam. And so I went and washed, and then I could see." "Well, where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know," he said. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. And now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Now we know Jesus did that deliberately, right? We know that he probably could have done it the day before, probably could have done it the day after. He did it on the Sabbath, and he does it for a reason. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I washed and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner perform such signs?" So they were divided. Then they turned again to the blind man. "What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened." The man replied, "Well, he is a prophet." They still did not believe that he had been blind, and so he had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. So the first thing that the Pharisees are doing is they're investigating, right? And this is in rabbinic culture, this is important. They needed to investigate the miracles. That in and of itself isn't a bad thing or something to be frowned upon. But do you see in this conversation that they're looking for every reason not to believe. They're trying to put as many walls up as they can. They say to the man, "You give us your testimony, you're the one who could see. What do you think?" "I think he's a Pharisee." "Oh no, you're wrong. Of course he's not a Pharisee." They still did not believe that he had been blind, so they call in the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked. "Is this the one who you say was born blind? How is it now he can see?" "We know he is our son," the parents answered, "and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." And his parents said this because they were already afraid of the Jewish leaders, who already had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." So here we have the religious leaders of Jesus' age, and the people are afraid of them. They're scared of them. A second time, they summoned the man who had been blind. And I love this interaction. It's beautiful. "Give glory to God by telling the truth," they said to the man. "We know that this man Jesus is a sinner." He replied, this is the blind man who can now see. He replied, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see." It's beautiful. Then they asked him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "I have told you already, and you did not listen." I love this. The guy gets on the front foot here. "I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples as well?" I love it. He's talking to the Pharisees here. These guys carried so much power, and this was a beggar on the street a day ago, right? Then they hurled insults at him and said, "You are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from." So they're looking at his qualifications. They're looking at his parents. They're looking at all these different reasons as to why they can write Jesus off. And the man answered, Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." To this they replied, "You were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out. This is the interaction of a blind man and the religious leaders of his day. I'm going to read those 4 verses for us again in John 10 in the way in his response in the next chapter from chapter 9. "Anyone that does not enter by the gate but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. But the sheep will never follow a stranger. In fact, they run away from him because they do not recognize the stranger's voice. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. The thief comes only to steal, to kill, and to destroy." The Pharisees in this, their response to the miracle of this man going from being blind to being able to see is to investigate, to interrogate. It's disbelief. It's an attack on Jesus' character. It's an attack on his authority. It's an attack on who he is. The thief comes only to steal, to kill, and to destroy. This thief is concerned with what they can take, what they can control. Now, from what I can understand in Scripture, this idea of love is the opposite of what we read in John 10:10 about this thief. Love is where you lay your life down for your neighbour, and it's where you have a greater vision for your neighbour than you could possibly have for yourself. It's where you get so excited by the things that are going well in other people's lives that you celebrate that. We don't get jealous about it. We don't try and think small things. We actually get excited about what is going on for those around us. Love is where we lay our lives down for our neighbour at great cost to ourselves. Whereas a thief takes, he steals, he kills, he destroys. Love is a builder. Love builds up. And in this story, we see the Pharisees interactions with this man. They are stealing, they are destroying, they are trying to belittle what has actually happened. They're trying to ignore what has actually happened because of their concern with Jesus. They don't care about this man at all. They don't care about what has happened for this man. They don't care about the miracle that has happened in his life or the transformation that has happened in his life. They don't care for him at all. And they are meant to be the shepherds of their day. They are meant to care for the sheep. The one who has cared for this man is the shepherd. The Pharisees were not concerned with the welfare of the sheep, and in fact, they hated that the man had been healed. When we look at this picture, we then get this narrative of the shepherd. And so we've got the thief and the robber, and we see that the thief and the robber, they want to come, they want to steal, they want to kill, and they want to control, they want to destroy. And we see that example with the man that is blind. But here we have this beautiful picture of who the shepherd is. Now, a shepherd had a lot of responsibility, and as we read through the Old Testament, we come across many different examples of stories of shepherds. The one I like the most is David, when he's having this interaction with Samuel, with Saul. And David is talking about his credentials for fighting Goliath. And Goliath had been calling out the Israelites, and the Israelites were petrified of this huge giant that had been calling them out. And David, when he goes to Saul and talks about why he is the one that has been called to take on Goliath, he says this in 1 Samuel 17, verse 34. He says, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it and I rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it." I think there's this image in my mind when I think about a shepherd where it's a pretty, pretty chilled job. They go around, they look after the sheep, they walk around with them. It's probably not a high-paying job, and they do their thing, make sure the sheep are okay. And one of the things that I was reminded of as I was reading this passage this week is just the role that the shepherd had was to put their life on the line for the sheep. A good shepherd, they weren't all good shepherds, but a good shepherd cared for the sheep. They realised how important the sheep were, and they looked after the sheep at great cost to themselves. And here we have David, this incredible warrior whose foundation was, whose training was as a shepherd before he went and fought Goliath. Here's this man here's this boy who, when he needs to fight a lion or fight a bear that has come after his sheep, he strikes it and he rescues it from its mouth. When they turned on it, when a bear or a lion turned on him, he seized it by the hair, struck it, and killed it. That's a man, right? That's good to go. So this is the role of a shepherd, is to look after the sheep. Now, in ancient times, the setup of the pen was really important. The sheep would roll around the countryside during the day, much as they do now. And what would happen at night is that the shepherd would build an enclosure. And you can see on the next picture, many would build their enclosures out of stone, many would build them out of sticks. But what they would do is they would keep a gap in the wall in the enclosure, and this was a really important part. The wall itself would stop wild animals coming in at night and would stop the sheep from getting out. But the way in which it worked is that there was no door, there was no gate on these pens. The shepherd himself would become the gate. They would lie in front of the gate at night and they would protect the sheep. They would stop the sheep from going out at night and wandering and getting lost and going their own way. They would also stop anything coming in that wasn't welcome. And so the shepherd would lie at night and protect the sheep. And it was this beautiful picture of the way in which a shepherd would go about looking after his sheep. So when we read these verses in John 1-10, look at the shepherd, that's the picture that Jesus is talking about. So in verse 3, Jesus says this. He says, "The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and he leads them out." There's a few things in this verse that are really important for us this morning. The first is the sheep listen to his voice. We've been made in the image of God, and we have actually been created to listen to his voice. We've been created to be in relationship with him. We've been created to listen to his voice because his ways are so much better. He is the one who is the great shepherd. He is the one who knows the best paths for us to take. And in our most intrinsic part of our being, we are created to be in relationship with him. We're created to follow his voice. And so Jesus says his sheep will listen to his voice. He goes on to say he calls his own sheep by name. This is a shepherd that is intimate. This is a shepherd that is loving. This is a shepherd who knows his sheep. He knows them in the inmost parts of who they are. When we look at Jesus, when we look at our lives, like he knows every aspect of our lives. There's nothing that is going on in our life that Jesus doesn't know. There's nothing that is going on in our life that Jesus doesn't care about. He knows us by name. He knows our heritage. He knows our story. He knows the good. He knows the bad. And we know that Jesus leaves the 99 for the one. He knows his sheep. He is the good shepherd. He leads his sheep out. This is really important. The shepherd has a plan. See, sheep are really good at wandering. They're really good at getting lost. In Isaiah 53:6, it says, "We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned his own way." We're really good at getting lost. We're really good at wandering. We're really good at going on our own path. And here we're told in verse 3 that the shepherd, the sheep will listen to his voice. He will call the sheep out and they will listen to him. And he knows them, but he will lead them. He has a plan. He knows what he's doing. He's qualified and he's worth following. And at the heart of who we are as people, we need to be led by this shepherd. We're really good at getting lost, yeah? When we look at Google Maps now, for some of us, we grew up with, was it CBD directory? Gregory's? Yep, a few more nods for Gregory's. Yep, okay. When I was growing up, you had to, that was when I first got my license, it was the Gregory's, right? Some of you guys, you lived with the Gregory's for a long time. When I first started driving, I had my Gregory's, I would go through it and I'd have a look and it took me ages to figure out how to get somewhere. And then we started to get, Google Maps and we'd get the blue dot and that would tell us where we would go. And nowadays, I couldn't get anywhere without that magical blue dot that takes me from A to B. Many of you guys, may not rely on the blue dot like I do, but I rely on that blue dot. And I remember one day I was driving to the city and I had an appointment. It was an important appointment at midday and I needed to get there and I was driving along and my phone died. I swear I charged it. It died. And I'm driving along, going into the city and put your hand up if you love driving through the city. None, that's awesome because I hate it so much. I thought there'd be a few weird people. But I hate driving through the city. I really hate it. And in Sydney, I hate it even more. Brisbane's all right. Sydney's a nightmare. So I'm driving through the city in Sydney. I've got to get to this appointment and I don't know where I'm going. The blue dot's abandoned me. It's left me and I'm trying to figure out where to go. And I'm getting closer and closer to this 12 o'clock deadline and I couldn't be late to it. And it was a beautiful story in the end because I remember I was driving and I knew I was reasonably close, but I wasn't going to get there. And no lie, I prayed this prayer. I'm like, God, I'm in over my head here. I need your help. And I was driving along the street and I saw this guy I'd gone to Bible college with 5 years earlier. And I was like, what the heck? I stopped, asked him for directions. He's like, oh yeah, you're 3 streets away. I was like, amazing, right? If it was just up to me, I never would have got there. That blue dot that's going to be heretical what I say. It's not the Holy Spirit of getting us places, but it's very, very helpful. But if I'm going by my own strength, I get lost really quickly, right? We can all relate to that. When I was driving here this morning, I don't know if many of you guys saw it, there was this fog that just dropped on us, right? Out in Fernvale, as I was driving out, we couldn't see. Right in front of us, we made it maybe 2 meters in front of us. And I did the weird thing where I put the hazard lights on as I'm driving down the highway because I was like, then people can see you a bit better. But you just could not see. This fog dropped on us. And in that fog, if I didn't have the lanes that I was going down, if I didn't have the markers on where to go, I would have got lost really easily. I would have gone into the wrong lane. I would have gone into some random's paddock. Those lanes kept me going where I needed to go when I couldn't really see what was right in front of me. Jesus leads us. He's qualified to do it. He has the authority to lead us. And the problem with us at the deepest part of our nature is that we're really, really, really good at getting lost. And one of the things that's breaking my heart at the moment is in our culture, We are surrounded by so many people who are lost. We're surrounded by so many people who are broken. And we live in a time, especially for our young people, my heart absolutely breaks for them. Because in one way or another, we are going to be led. We're either led by Jesus and led by the Good Shepherd who leads us down the right path, who leads us to life and life to the full, or we're led by our culture. We're led by those around us. And the pull of our culture in this time, the pull of our culture for our young people is extremely strong. The things that they have access to in regards to their phone, the things that all of us have access to in regards to our phone, things like TikTok, things like Instagram, they are shaping our young people. They are shaping our culture. And that fog that I saw this morning, that fog is getting denser and denser. It is getting harder and harder for people to see the truth, to see the lanes, to see the way in which they need to go. We live in a time that people are so lost, they're so confused, and they're hurting. Like, people are hurting so much. And yet we sit here today, and if we know Jesus, we know the Good Shepherd. We know his voice. We know how good it is to be led by him. The sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. In verse 7, he says, "Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. I am the one that lies across that gap in the pen. I am the one that someone has to come to before they get to you." The shepherd protects the sheep. He knows what is good for the sheep. He knows what they need. He knows that they need to be in at night, and he knows that they need rest. Otherwise, they would wander throughout the night. But he also knows that he needs to protect us from those against us. He needs to protect us from the wolves, the bears, the lions. And he stands in the gap in that pen, and he says, if you want to get to the sheep, you need to go through me. If we've accepted Jesus into our life, we are one of those sheep, and he stands at the gate where everything has to go through him. Now, one of the hardest things with this is suffering. As I was preparing this message this week, the hardest thing is suffering when we think about that. Because everything has to go through the shepherd when we are one of the sheep. And where this analogy we don't get the full picture, as is the case with most of Jesus' stories and analogies. One of the things that we need to wrestle with is this idea of suffering. Because all of us in this room have suffered. Some of us have gone through great suffering, great loss. And so I don't fully understand how the shepherd sits at the gate and allows that suffering to come in. But I do know that there are aspects of that suffering that are good for us. What I don't understand is how you can go through suffering, how you can go through trials, how you can go through hardship in this life and do it without the shepherd sitting at the gate. Because I know how hard suffering is, and we all do. We know the deep pains of what life can throw at us. But I don't know what that is like without the Good Shepherd. I became a Christian at 16, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But we've gone through some really big things as a family in our lives. I remember Jasper, who's now 7, had a major brain operation when he was 6 months old. And it was a really big surgery. We were really worried about him. It kind of came from nowhere. And we were warned by the surgeons that this could be it, like prepare yourself. And I remember we were in the hospital for a week, 2 weeks with Jasper at that time. I remember when he had the operation, and we just had, and I can't explain it to any other way than just saying that we had this overwhelming peace. We knew God had it. We had no idea what the outcome would be. We had no idea what would happen for Jasper. We knew God had it. And during that 2 weeks while we were in hospital, like, God's peace was just so heavy on us. We weren't worried about him. We weren't worried about the outcome. We loved him so, so much. And yet we knew that God had it. We knew that Jesus was the Good Shepherd. We knew that he was the one that was standing at the gate, lying at the gate for us as a family. And that is what we experienced. And so for us in this room, as we wrestle with this passage and wrestle with the hard stuff in this passage, when we look at it, suffering is going to be the big one. And the thing I look at the people in our culture who I know are wrestling and I know are struggling, how you can deal with suffering, how you can go through hardship, how you can go through the loss of family members or pain or sickness or whatever it is and not know Jesus. Our friends need to know Jesus. They need to know the Good Shepherd. Our workmates need to know the Good Shepherd and the way in which he leads and loves us. Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. In verse 9, it says, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. This is where the metaphor becomes real for us. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. Jesus is the gate to life. There is no other. There's no other name that leads to life. There's no other name that leads to salvation. There's no other name that leads to eternity. It's just Jesus. That's it. He's the shepherd at the gate. Now, I know this in my life. I know this how this played out. And I've shared this with you before, but I was a 16-year-old sitting in a maths classroom. And I was watching one of my mates, and I'd been wrestling with God. I'd been intrigued by God. I'd been around Christians, but I'd never walked through the gate. And I watched as this guy named Joel walked up this hill in a maths classroom as I was bored in year 10, year 9, year 10. And I watched him, and I looked, and I sat there and went, he has something I don't have. I'd been struggling with depression and sadness and pride and anxiety. And I watched him, and this guy just carried this deep joy. He'd gone through heaps of stuff, and I knew the stuff he'd gone through. He'd been a wild kid, but he carried this deep joy. And in this moment, sitting in a maths classroom by the window, I sat there and went, I need to have what he had. And I knew what he had. I'd heard him talk about Jesus before. And so right then and there, sitting in a maths classroom, I gave my life to Jesus. It was that simple. There was nothing like really miraculous about this moment. I sat there and went, I need to have what he has, and I know that what he has is Jesus, and so I'm going to take this step through the gate, right? I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. It's not difficult to walk through the gate. And the reason it's not difficult to walk through the gate is because Jesus is the one who has done all the work. He's the one who keeps it open. When he died on the cross and rose again, he is the one that allowed us to gave us this beautiful pathway to salvation and to eternity. This beautiful entrance to relationship with him for all time. And he doesn't require you to be a certain shape to get through the door. He doesn't require you to be wearing the right clothes. He definitely doesn't want you to be clean. You don't have to have the right qualifications. You don't have to have enough money. You just need to walk through that gate. And that's why he states in this that whoever. Another version says, any man that walks through me will be saved. It is not about what we have done. It is not about our appearance. It is not about the good things that we have put together in our life. It is whether or not we have walked through the gate, whether or not we have accepted Jesus as our great shepherd. And so really simply, I just wanted to give us a really simple encouragement and a warning. And that's just to not stand outside the gate and just look at it. Because what the Pharisees did is they sat outside the gate. They could see the gate, but what they were really, really good at is they were really good at critiquing the gate. They were really good at analysing the gate, analysing the structure of it and how it was built and where it was placed and questioning it and investigating it and looking at it. But what the Pharisees didn't do for the most part, and there are exceptions to this, but what the Pharisees didn't do for the most part is they didn't walk through the gate. They didn't acknowledge who Jesus was. They didn't want relationship with Jesus. They preferred religion. They preferred to be a disciple of Moses as opposed to being a disciple of the creator of the universe. Don't stand outside the gate and look at it. So many people have done that. Walk through the gate. The final part of this is, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They'll come in and they'll go out and they will find pasture. It's this beautiful conclusion. Because it's really good to be under the shepherd's watch, right? When we walk through that gate, he knows us by name. He knows who we are. He knows every aspect of our lives. And he is the good shepherd. He's the creator of the universe. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the first and the last. He's the one who died on the cross so that we could have life and have it to the full. He's the one who defeated death 3 days later and said, "Death, where is your sting?" He is the one that leads us, and he promises us in John 10 verse 9 that we were able to go in and go out, and and he will lead us to find good pasture. We can't find it by ourselves. He is the one that can fulfill us, can satisfy us, can fill us with joy and happiness and good things. And the more that we allow him to lead in our life, the better we are at listening to his voice and just following him, the better the pasture is that we will receive in this life. That pasture has nothing to do with money or finances or prosperity. It's to do with joy. It's to do with satisfaction in him. It's to do with deep and utter fulfilling relationship with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And that's why Jesus says in in chapter 10, verse 10, he says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. It's beautiful. That's our God. That's the love he has for us. That's the vision he has for us. We're Pharisees, we're religion, where this world wants to control and diminish and make us smaller. What God wants to do is lead us to good pastures. And he has a vision for us as one of love, where he says to us, I've come that you may have life and have it to the full. Let me pray for us. Jesus, we thank you that you're the good shepherd. And Father, I just want to pray over us and just pray for those of us who need to take a step through that door today. Father, I pray that you would just be speaking into our heart, that you would just be showing us and revealing yourself to us, but just giving us courage and boldness just to step out in faith. Jesus, we thank you that you lead us to good pastures. We thank you that in your name there is joy, that there is fulfillment, there is life. Outside of your name, there's just death. And so, Jesus, help us to be a people who are in relationship with you, who enjoy you, who love you. And Father, I just want to pray that as we go out this week, for those of us who know you, who love you, who enjoy you, Father, help us to just go out into our world and just overflow that. Help us to have a heart for those that we're working with, for those that we're just crossing paths with this week, for those who don't know you, who desperately need to know you, to know your goodness, to know the sound of your voice. Father, I pray that you would just give us insight, give us boldness, just to overflow your goodness and just to point people towards you, the great shepherd. In your name, amen.